And what do we actually, like there's a lot of scary statistics thrown out around LGBTQ youth. And particularly around this idea, that you mentioned earlier, that if we don't affirm the identities of so-called trans kids, then they'll kill themselves, that they'll commit suicide.
Yeah,
And,
it's a
unless
lie.
we want dead kids, we have to. Like, is there any truth to that? Like, are there kids who are killing themselves because people aren't affirming their gender identities?
No, see what they're doing is they're weaponizing a half truth. So the thing is that kids or even adults, people who identify as trans, they almost always have some other mental health issue. It's usually some comorbid issue going on. Usually they might have trauma in their past. They might be autistic and struggling socially, so they're socially isolated. They might have an eating disorder. They might have just all sorts of things: depression, anxiety, relationship issues, whatever the case may be. So those factors make someone a higher chance of having thoughts of suicide or even making a suicide attempt, right? So they're more vulnerable. This is a vulnerable population. So that's making everybody scared. Oh, we have this vulnerable population. But the thing that they're not proving, and none of the data proves it if you look at it, is that whether you affirm or not affirm, whether that makes the difference of whether their suicidal thoughts and behavior is going to go down. So
Hmm.
we don't have that. So they might be more suicidal because of other reasons, but the problem is we're not addressing what those other reasons are. We're just we're zeroing in on this gender thing, and then it doesn't actually change the outcomes. They're still suicidal in the end. I mean, usually what happens is for a while the suicidality or the superficial sort of mental health issues go down because they get a lot of praise, they get a lot of accolades, they get what they think they want, they get a lot of likes on Instagram or on social media. Some kids literally get assemblies. They all get right. You get all this attention. They're stunning and brave. So of course they're not going to feel as depressed. They're looked at as wonderful. But eventually that stuff goes down, and it takes time and like years. And so then if you look at people over the years, if you follow them 7+ years, then usually whatever the thing was that they were masking comes back up for them. And so that's the thing they're not talking about. So we're thinking short term, yes, maybe short term it does actually help, but long term, no.
Yeah. And I think that's like a huge problem in society in general in terms of how we look at and understand and talk about and treat mental health issues.
Yeah.
For example, like addiction
Mm-hmm.
is usually rooted in some kind of trauma, but instead we talk about it as a disease that
Yeah.
you can inherit, or people think of it as like purely a willpower thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the root of the issue is very rarely addressed. But in terms of the gender identity thing, I mean, really, like the underlying factors and anything else that's going on in that kid's life seems to be wholly ignored.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these things just seem obvious to me, in terms of the trend of girls wanting to transition to become boys,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Um,
Or just not be
it's
girls. There's that too. I
right.
think there's a
Like,
lot
I
of that.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, like to me, it seems obvious that going through puberty, experiencing sexual harassment, maybe experiencing things like sexual assault and molestation, um, would certainly teach a
Mm.
girl that they didn't want to be a girl or that they wanted to escape their body.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you
Yeah.
come across that?
Oh, yeah. That's I think that's what I saw the most of when I was at that program, I was meeting the girls, and they were all non-binary, by the way. Not maybe I was just meeting them at a certain
Mm.
stage of their identities. Maybe if I met these same kids now, they might be identifying as boys. From what I understand, especially listening to detransitioners, they tend to start with the non-binary as kind of a stepping stone, and then they move on to being boys or move on to doing more of transitions. But that's who I was personally meeting who I was working with. They were all non-binary girls, natal girls, however, you know. Um, so yeah, I was definitely seeing that for sure.
What kinds of things were they talking about, or what kinds of things were they telling you?
So, I mean, there's one girl that stands out in my mind. She did have sexual trauma in her history. And what I noticed, the pattern I saw was a lot of these girls felt very powerless in their life. They felt, whether it be from something in history or just for whatever reason. So then they became non-binary, and then they can kind of control everyone around them. They could say everyone's a transphobe or a bigot because they're not using the right pronoun, and it gave them the sense of power, and then it would mask the other issues that were happening for them. And so that was the biggest trend that I saw with all of the girls. There was one girl that I think was more on the autistic spectrum, so she really struggled socially, and then this gave her a way to feel like she fit in and have a community and feel. And the other thing that was interesting was even the kids who didn't have the special pronouns, they got something out of it too. They kind of felt good about themselves by affirming the others. Like, this makes me a good person by using the right pronoun with this other their friend, right? There's a way to make friends. Like, oh, this I'm showing everybody I'm a good friend by using this pronoun. And so it became this virtue signal, but they wouldn't see it that way. They're kids. They just wanted to be friends and be nice. But really
Yeah.
what they were doing is what I saw was they weren't being themselves. They were trying to connect with these superficial labels. So I saw that which was a shame.
Which again, like, I think that's like a pretty common thing for teenagers. Like, I remember
Yeah,
when I was a teenager and you're just always trying to figure out what group you fit into. Like, what
exactly.
am I? Like, am I, when I was in grade 8, that was like 1993 or
Mhm.
1994 or something like that, and it's like, oh, are you like a skid? Are you a
Right.
skater? Like, are you like, I don't even want to say the rest of the words because they're all like embarrassing and so stupid. But
I was a
like,
total nerd in junior high. I mean, it was awful. You should have seen the haircut I had. This was the late 80s. And I had the blue eyeshadow and the pink frosty lipstick.
oh,
And
okay. I wore all my dad's clothes in grade 8. I wore
it wasn't,
I
it's
wore
really
like flannels
embarrassing.
and combat boots and like long underwear.
But I didn't, yeah, same. I didn't find my friend group. I did find my way, I think, in high school. When I was a sophomore in high school, I joined the track team. So then I found my gang, I guess, with the track team. So
Yeah.
every teen, I mean, every human needs this to a degree, right?
You're trying to find
So
your tribe. It's
yeah.
totally natural.
And so you see these kids floundering, especially kids with underlying mental health issues or other whatever it is, things going on in their lives that are causing struggles for them. It's easy to see why they gravitate towards this.